Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next avatar discussion video. This one is going to be all about the past lives, everything pretty much about this concept in Avatar. I suppose more specifically on the idea of the present or current avatar communicating with the past lives and how that works, how we can analyze all of those scenes that we've seen in the franchise to give us some kind of clues to answer some of the bigger questions, to try and eventually get us to, can we actually figure out, like, is it possible for the past lives to be restored? Because we know since they were lost in Korra Book 2, a lot of fans have been very upset about this concept. It's a very kind of emotional topic in the fan base. So trying to answer that question, I think, is a key one. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be going over some technical details about the Avatar past lives, how it works, and then we'll get into all of the scenes. We're going to go through it sort of roughly in order, every instance of past life communication, and try and figure some stuff out. Before we get into the details though, I just want to talk about that YouTube channel membership on my channel. It's a great way for you guys to support the channel going forward, and you do get some perks for supporting. So the main ones would of course be the kind of channel member badge that you get that will appear beside your name in comments and when you participate in live stream chat. You also get access to exclusive emotes that I made that you can use again in the chat and in the comment section. There's also like exclusive posts that I'll put up on the kind of channel member feed, where I will ask for sort of feedback, suggestions. You guys will often get a chance to decide on a kind of video topic or just help me with something, more of a kind of behind the scenes type thing. And then the main things with the higher level tier are that you get access to YouTube channel member exclusive videos, which are often kind of topics and things that I don't typically do on my main channel because I don't think they'd get views. But if you want more of the kind of stuff that I'm interested in, there's some very different videos than you'll see on the channel. They're pretty fun to do. I make sure to put out at least one a month, but sometimes you'll see two or maybe even more. The final thing is that at the higher tier you will also get a credit at the end of some of my bigger videos, including this one, which you'll see at the end of this video, who gets credited there. So with that out of the way, just a nice way for you guys to help support the channel. Again, how you do it: click the join button anywhere on the channel, or click the link in the description of the video, which also brings you to the join page. But yeah, let's get straight into this with the big question, which is always for a lot of people: can the past lives be restored by Korra or a future avatar? For me, the key question to answer this question is, do the past lives exist separately to Raava, or are they a projection of the past avatar by Raava? We're effectively asking the question here of, are the past lives inherently tied to the kind of current avatar and the avatar spirit, Raava, or are those past lives separate entities to a degree? This helps to answer the question, because if they are separate, then the idea of restoring the past lives is definitely possible, because theoretically you can just round them up again and combine them with Raava to get the same effect. But if they only existed because they were quote-unquote stored in Raava, then they likely can't be restored, since that was what was lost when Raava was destroyed, when we lost the past lives. So that's why this question is ultimately the key, and that's why we're going to look through all the scenes involving an avatar communicating with their past lives and try and come up with an answer if we can find anything. First up though, some technical details. What is the avatar? We just have to get the baseline stuff out of the way so we can focus on the more in-depth stuff as we go through the scenes. The avatar is a human combined with the light spirit Raava. This connection is special because it is formed due to harmonic convergence. This makes it different than a typical human spirit combination because this combination, because of harmonic convergence, has no energy limit. Typically, a spirit trying to amplify the power of a human would risk damaging or altering that human because there's so much power involved with spirits. But harmonic convergence made it so that all the avatars can fully handle the power of an all-powerful spirit like Rava and multiple elements within that. That's the core idea of harmonic convergence. If it just, the avatar can basically handle unlimited energy in their body, which pretty much no one else can. Each new avatar is a reincarnation of the first avatar, Wan. His spirit, which is linked to Rava, is reborn in the next avatar. So that's another key point. The idea of that the avatar cycle is a reincarnation cycle that started from the first avatar, Wan, and his connection to Rava. When Wan died, Rava decided that that would continue on to all of Wan's future lives. So the idea is that Wan's spirit is constantly reborn, highlighting the idea that there's only one spirit when it comes to the human aspect of the avatar. That spirit is what is linked to Rava, which is why the avatar is the only kind of human where their reincarnation is known. Other people, I guess, reincarnate as well, but because they have no way to obviously find that out, like the avatar gets always noted because they have the 4 elements and the spirit inside them, that's an easy way to locate the fact that someone is a reincarnation of someone else. The avatar has 3 core powers or abilities. First one is the ability to bend all 4 elements. The second one is the power to fully connect human and spirit to increase their power greatly. That's the avatar state. And the one we're very interested in here is the ability to communicate with the previous incarnations of the avatar. There's other more kind of minor powers and stuff like that the avatar does have. But if you were highlight it down to 3 core ones, that is definitely what they are. Going in a little bit more in depth, the multi-element bending is fine. We don't really need to go into that here. It's not really related to the topic that we're talking about here. We know how Wan came to be a quadruple bender in beginnings, and there's no need to cover it here. The avatar state can be a little confusing here. I've seen a lot of fans get confused about the way that exactly that this works and how it's related or not to the past life communication. So the core power of the avatar state is literally just the human becoming fully empowered by the spirit side of the Rava, of the avatar. So Rava fully giving sort of all of her power over to the human aspect of the avatar. Typically they're linked, but they're not always fully together. Otherwise, like, the avatar will be in the avatar state at all times. So the idea is that this is them coming together completely for the whole time, basically. And this is where the full power of the avatar comes out, is through the avatar state. So Wan was able to basically use the avatar state with no past lives. So the fact that Wan could use the avatar state highlights that the past lives are not a requirement to do it. They just add on to the avatar state, making it more refined. Because you even note that Wan was able to use effectively the prototype of the avatar state before he'd even properly merged with Rava. The ability to connect with the past lives is more or less separate to the avatar state, since Aang was able to talk to the previous 4 avatars at a time where he didn't have access to the avatar state. So obviously he gains access to the avatar state in the middle of the fight with Ozai, but before that fight he talked to the past avatars, highlighting the difference between these 2 abilities. The avatar state is energy based, while communicating with the past lives is more based around spirituality. We'll be going through past lives scenes, not avatar state scenes, though there might be some overlap. Final point. Why were the past lives lost? If we want to know the solution to this, potentially, we need to know what happened in the first place. Roku explains that the avatar state is where an avatar is most powerful and also most vulnerable. This is because human and spirit are one. If one is killed, the other is killed. The cycle breaks if the avatar is killed in the avatar state, because Rava takes the hit also, and she is the part of the avatar that stores the knowledge and power of the past lives. In the scene where the past lives are lost, Rava has been ripped out of Korra, and Unalaq destroys her separate to Korra. The two are still bonded despite Rava not being inside Korra, so this is why Korra still feels each blow that Rava takes and can sense and feel the past lives gradually going away. Rava being quote-unquote destroyed breaks the connection between her and Korra. It ends the cycle and loses all of the past life data. Korra recombines with Rava at the end of book 2, which starts the cycle again. It restores the connection between Korra and Rava, or one spirit and Rava, but it doesn't bring back the lost past life data that we saw fading away as Rava took all of those hits. So that is kind of how it happened. It relates to sort of the mechanics of sort of how the avatar state works, that the spirit aspect of the avatar is most vulnerable when using the full power of the avatar, and that's what happened here. Now let's jump into our first scene here. So the way we're doing this is we're going through it sort of ATLA first in chronological order, then we'll go through Korra, then we'll go through Kyoshi. So 107, Winter Solstice Part 1, The Spirit World. The spirit of Roku's dragon Fang finds Aang, who has separated his spirit from his body, and shows him how to talk to Roku. The text in yellow here is just basically the points about this scene that are notable. One, it's an animal guide connection as the first way Aang is about to communicate with a past life. It happens because Aang does something spiritual, which is that he's chasing after Heibai. Heibai transfers between the physical world and the spirit world, but Aang touches him as he does this. So Aang doesn't get transferred into the spirit world, but it's enough to separate his spirit from his body. That's what happens here. This scene in the spirit world, we never actually see the spirit world. It is just Aang's spirit outside of his body, still in the physical world. It's not direct communication, highlighting that Aang is not yet spiritual enough to simply meditate and talk to Roku. And then the only other point to make here is just that it is unusual, this scene, like being the first one, that it involves an animal companion of an avatar. Animal companion, animal guides is a concept that we sort of know about, everyone brings it up, but we know very little details about it, in that we cannot confidently say at all that like Fang is a reincarnation of Wan's cat deer companion Mula. We can't really say that Appa is a reincarnation of Fang. We can't say that Naga is a reincarnation of Appa. Just that it seems like, in general, most avatars have, or at least have the capacity to find an animal that is a true spiritual and friend companion who they have a very, very strong connection with. And what happens with, I suppose, Fang, and the fact that he dies next to Roku, highlights, I suppose, that they theoretically have the ability to sort of be linked in spirit as well. Now, I would like to see if this works with other animals as well. Like, would it be possible to see a spirit Appa for someone communicating with Aang, or that sort of thing? Because it is weird that Fang is the only example of an animal sort of spirit thing that we really see related to an avatar. But anyway, we move on. 108, Winter Solstice Part 2, Avatar Roku. During the solstice, Aang manages to get into the temple and speak to Roku. So, what we learn from this is that this first communication with a past life for Aang requires a spiritual event, the solstice, the winter solstice, and it requires a spiritual location for Aang to speak to Roku. And that is the fire temple here, and specifically to be in a room with like a statue of Roku at the time when the solstice happens. So quite a heavy sequence of events to get across the idea that an inexperienced Aang in these matters requires quite a lot of work to have the connection properly work. So they speak what seems to be in the spirit world here, and Roku is aware of current events. He doesn't just talk with the context of his own era, because he talks about Ozai using the comet, which is about to happen. So he's aware of the sort of threats to the world. Like Aang knows about Ozai through Bumi from a few episodes ago, but Aang doesn't really know the significance of the comet. Roku, though does know, I suppose, that the comet is a thing, and so is able to use sort of his own knowledge from his era, his life, in combination with the stuff he knows through Aang to give Aang the advice that he needs. That's sort of the importance of this, that the avatars all have present day context. The point about this being quote unquote in the spirit world is an interesting one, because we'll see this is perhaps where the inconsistency begins to come in. We'll be talking a lot about, have they done the blue transparent spirit in the right location, and how does this work, what is or is not consistent. They're also a little bit weird on sort of these really sudden transfers into the spirit world and stuff like that happening, in that literally like the light hits the eyes of the Roku statue and like Aang is just talking to Roku. Like he hasn't like meditated into the spirit world, he's just here all of a sudden. But I think the intent is, we didn't really see the spirit world in the previous episode. This is the spirit world here. It makes sense. Roku's in full color, Aang's in full color. They're in the spirit world, in my opinion. Next, also 108, Winter Solstice Part 2, Avatar Roku. Roku helps Aang get out of being captured by taking control of his body and using the Avatar state to destroy the temple. So, Aang becomes a spirit projection of Roku, and when the solstice ends, Aang returns to normal. So this is one of these cases of sort of like an avatar past life taking over or possessing the current avatar. Now, to me, this is the way I like it sort of done here, where it's clear like Aang isn't physically morphing into Roku. A spirit sort of projection of Roku sort of like envelops him. And this, I think, is the correct way to do this without it feeling kind of weird. This is something that they try to establish as the series goes on as being a way for an avatar and a past avatar to kind of communicate and interact, in that Roku basically controls the avatar state in this moment to do like lava bending to break down the temple. So it is Roku in charge, and the other people witnessing this see Aang as Roku. And the interesting point is obviously that when the solstice ends, this spirit of Roku just sort of goes away, and Aang is just left there kind of lacking in energy because of what just happened. So, you know, it's an interesting, it's a bit of a weird kind of like ability, I think, hence why we don't see this one too much, but I think it's pretty well done the way they do it here initially. Next, we jump to 116, the Deserter. Roku speaks to Zhang Zhang in a vision to convince him to teach Aang firebending. So there's a few interesting points here. One, Aang is unaware that Roku actually spoke to Zhang Zhang. The other question is like, is this in the spirit world where Roku's talking to Zhang Zhang, or is this just some sort of a vision? It's super unclear, because the way the scene goes, it's like Aang is talking to Zhang Zhang. Zhang Zhang says, "I won't train you," and sort of insults Aang. Roku then sort of steps in, talks to Zhang Zhang, and convinces him to, like, "You must train me. I've done this a million times." Zhang Zhang then talks to Roku and says, "Yes, you know, I will train you." Aang then reacts to that and like, "Oh, cool, that's great." And his reaction, Aang's response to what Zhang Zhang says, makes it pretty clear Aang had no clue what Roku said. He thinks that Zhang Zhang just had a change of heart right in front of him. So what actually happened in this instance? Because Zhang Zhang is basically talking to like Aang and Roku at effectively the same time. But what exactly is happening here? That like Roku can make himself known to Zhang Zhang but not known to Aang? It's really weird. This is probably one of the most sort of like, what is going on here scenes? Because like I said here, like, is that the spirit world? I don't think it is. Because Aang, I don't get the impression Aang ever like leaves his body to go to the spirit world. So it's Roku changing, like, it seems to be Roku showing Zhang Zhang a vision. That's the only way to explain the visuals of the fire on the tree and Roku doing that. It's so weird and unusual. But again, this is very early Avatar. They don't have everything set in stone at this point. So things are a little bit kind of vague and murky. 120, Siege of the North Part 2. Aang meditates into the spirit world and finds Roku as a reflection in the water. Roku does come up out of the water more normally, but I think the significance is how it kind of forms. He tells Aang about Ko. Aang properly is in the spirit world here, meditates in the way that we usually associate it with in most media, so that is fine. He has to do it at a spirit oasis because it's still early in the journey, but perfect, fine, makes sense, it's the way it's usually done. Aang follows a spirit firefly to find Roku. Basically, the firefly just guides Aang into the water. He looks down, his reflection, his shadow effectively turns into Roku, as you can see here in this shot, and then they continue their conversation in a more normal fashion. But the idea of the vision first coming from Aang's reflection in the water to highlight that Roku is Aang's reflection. It's the same spirit. I like that. That's pretty cool. 201, the Avatar state. We all know about this one. Aang goes into the Avatar state in a rage. Roku steps in to explain and take Aang out of the Avatar state. So we get to see Spirit Fang again. Roku shows Aang a vision of what's going on here. It isn't the spirit world since they're transparent, but I think as we go on, we're going to realize that there are sort of two ways that blue transparent spirits happen. One is spirits in the physical world, like human-esque spirits in the physical world, show as blue transparent spirits. And then while you're in the spirit world, when you activate a vision, you suddenly become blue transparent to contrast with the color of the vision. But it'll be more clear in an upcoming scene. But yeah, again, Spirit Fang. Otherwise, this one I think makes a decent amount of sense. 205, Avatar Day. During Aang's defense at his trial, Kyoshi takes over Aang to explain what she did before leaving. So it's another Avatar possession scene, but this time there is no clear visual to show that Kyoshi taking over Aang is a spirit projection as such. Like, there's no glow coming off Kyoshi here or anything like that. It's meant to clearly be the same type of scene as we discussed previously in 108, but visually they just show it differently. Now, Kyoshi here doesn't do anything except talk, but it is interesting that, you know, there's no real transparency. Now, it could be something to do with the fact that, like, Aang is wearing Kyoshi's clothes in this scene, so the clothes are real, and, like, Aang is there. It's just, I think you needed a little bit of a glow here, but I get what they were trying to do here. It's just, it doesn't help when it comes to trying to create consistency around this, the way they show it. Otherwise, possession is, you know, fair enough. It's just, I think it's a bit weird if you show it without the glow, because it feels like it's some sort of like body morphing thing, which kind of feels weird. Next, the webcomic that takes place in between book 2 and 3, Escape from the Spirit World. To repair his damaged connection to Rava after Azula's lightning, Aang has to meet the previous 4 avatars in the spirit world. So this all takes place in the spirit world. Aang is unconscious, he's in the spirit world. He meets one avatar at a time. We never see 2 past lives at the same time. He has to do it sort of one at a time, in order. Each avatar tells Aang where to go to sort of meet the next one. And I think that's kind of telling. Across all of these scenes, no avatar ever communicates with 2 past lives at the same time. There are times when in sort of visions they are shown a visual representation of the cycle, showing multiple avatars, but you never see 2 past avatars that communicate with each other, or 2 past avatars communicate with the current avatar at the same time, which would be the key point that would really let you know that the past lives are separate. But anyway, he connects with them in order to repair the connection. Karuk's actions seem to suggest he hunts for Ko at all times, because they have the whole conversation about, like, Aang in 120 saw Umi when Ko showed him. So Aang is able to relay this new information that Karuk has never learned about before to him. And it gets into this weird debate about, oh, well, because Karuk acts like this is brand new information and rushes off to try and find Ko, that immediately tells us that Karuk just exists in the spirit world and hunts him at all times. But if this spirit projection of Karuk is a true projection of the person as he was, basically as he died, more or less, then of course any new information about the event he was doing right as he died he's going to react to it, even though he theoretically knows that he is a past life. And when Aang moves on to find Yang Chen, he isn't actually running around the spirit world anymore. That's my interpretation of this, is that, look, we never get confirmation that when Aang leaves this area where Karuk is, that Karuk continues to do what he does. It's just roughly implied by the scene as it happens. But we never stick around to see what the past lives are doing. But as we'll see, there are a few scenes as we go through here that seem to suggest that the past lives are facilitated through Rava. For one, Aang is trying to repair his connection to Rava by fixing the connection to these specific characters here. So next is 301, The Awakening. This is just a kind of classic, this is how it should be done type scene. Roku appears before Aang to tell him he has not failed and that he believes he will save the world. He appears to Aang in the physical world as a transparent blue spirit. Perfect. To me, this is it as it should be. No problems here. 306, The Avatar and the Fire Lord. There's a few things to go through here. Roku contacts Aang in a dream to tell him to come to his island on the summer solstice so he can tell him his story. So it seems that Roku requires a spiritual event and a spiritual location with a link to him to tell and show Aang his full memories and full story. So because he's trying to tell him such detailed information, he needs a really strong connection with Aang. But interestingly, he can contact Aang through a dream to at least have some form of connection. That's unique. Next, when Aang goes to the island, he meditates into the spirit world where he meets Roku and Fang. They bring him to see these visions or memories. So this seems to be one of the stronger connections we have seen, which is why, it obviously gives access to these memories. And visually, perfect here. Aang has meditated into the spirit world, so because he's in the spirit world as a spirit, he's in full color. He's not a transparent blue spirit. He is technically, I suppose, incorporeal in the spirit world, but they have the kind of colors and visuals correct here. Also, Roku makes sense for him also to just be in full color. Same with Fang, and I think this is the first time we see Fang in full color rather than transparent. So that's cool. The next moment of 306 changes this. When they then go on to view the memories, they're suddenly transparent spirits, even though the previous scene shows them as being not transparent spirits. So this presents the idea of okay, the past lives can show the current avatar their memories in the spirit world, but when they do this, they switch to being transparent blue spirits, kind of almost inhabiting the world of these memories. It's a weird visual thing in that the blue spirits are the spirits in the physical world, but they also are the spirits in visions. Why they're the same thing gets a little bit confusing, but it roughly makes sense, I think. Next, 319, Sozin's Comet Part 2, The Old Masters. On the Line Turtle, Aang meditates and speaks to the previous 4 avatars in order. The past avatars are all transparent blue spirits. Roku is not aware of where Aang is. He can't tell him what location in the world Aang is on. So the knowledge of the past lives is limited, I think, again, highlighting they know about their own lives and they have some context of the present day through Aang, but they are not omniscient, basically. The spirits also come out of Aang, and interestingly, you can see here, visually how this is shown in the episode is that Aang meditates, the sort of spirit, his own spirit sort of begins to merge out of himself, separates and becomes Roku or whoever the other spirit is. And again, this is on a really spiritual location, on a line turtle. Really cool moment. Aang is spiritual during these moments. This is perfect sort of, communicating with the past lives. And I think visually this gets across quite clearly Aang is speaking to an aspect of his own spirit, not the appearance of Roku's spirit from wherever it was, because where it was within him. That's a key one. Next, the promise. We move into the comics. So this is the first Avatar comic trilogy. In the comics, Aang uses a necklace with elemental medallions to help communicating with the previous 4 avatars. He breaks his connection with Roku by symbolically destroying the fire medallion. They get a little bit inconsistent with the whole blue transparent spirit situation here, because okay, Roku is a blue transparent spirit. That makes sense. But why is Aang also a blue transparent spirit? What gets confusing is that, look at the first panel. It's Aang on top of a roof in the physical world, eyes closed, meditating on the fire medallion to talk to Roku. We cut to the next panel and both of them are transparent. This would suggest that Aang has separated his spirit from his body in the physical world and is also talking to Roku, which seems a little bit weird. Now, it's a bit confusing because they also don't seem to showcase that they're in the spirit world. So is this just how they're visually showing basically Aang having a conversation with Roku effectively in his head, just sort of talking to the voice of Roku, but how they visually want to show it here? It's weird because that second panel is the two of them meditating clearly on the same roof. To me, how you should show this scene is Aang, eyes open, physical, normal color, talking to a blue spirit projection of Roku. Or you change the background of all of the other later panels to have them actually be in the spirit world, both in normal color, or I don't know, it's confusing in this exact way, the fact that they're both kind of blue spirits. You kind of have to choose one way or the other, not try and get the kind of best of both worlds, otherwise it kind of creates weird inconsistencies. But anyway, we skip to the third Avatar comic, The Rift. Yang Chen tries to contact Aang but struggles because Aang broke his connection to Roku. She visually appears but cannot talk to Aang. He's able to communicate with her by meditating during an air nomad meal they have to celebrate the Yang Chen festival. Later, he restores his connection to Roku, which allows him to speak to Yang Chen again. A few things here in terms of inconsistencies. Yang Chen should be transparent blue in the first page, like she is in the third. So if you look at that, you can see here Aang puts his hand through Yang Chen, highlighting that she's, incorporeal, she's like a spirit. Why isn't she glowing blue in any way? Then in the third page there, you can see that middle panel, it's Yang Chen in color, but she's got the spirit glow around her. That's to me how it should be shown. Why isn't it like that at the start? And I think it's weird to say that because he has broken, his connection is shaky with Yang Chen, that she'd appear almost more realistic than when he has his full connection. That seems a bit weird. Again, consistency problems. Similarly, the whole idea of okay, it makes sense. Without the direct avatar connection, he connects to Yang Chen, instead using the Yang Chen festival as the key spiritual event. He meditates from the Cabbage Merchant's restaurant, which is actually in the town that's been built on previously sacred air nomad ground. So the location also is correct, and he's doing the meal and the tradition in the right way. But again, it's this idea of Aang is transparent blue, implying that his spirit has been separated from his body in the physical world, or he's in the spirit world and they're in a vision in the spirit world. And if you look at the background of the location that they're in, again, it doesn't obviously seem to be the spirit world, in that visually what they seem to be showing here is the site of the Yang Chen festival, which is kind of this weird representation of kind of what the area looks like without all the buildings that they're in. So they're kind of half trying to show the physical world, half trying to show the spirit world, but not really doing either or super accurately, and it's not clear what exactly is going on. You can see in the last page here that when he restores his connection with Roku, they again have a vision. So this sort of makes sense here. They're both spirits because, you know, he's reconnected with the two of them. They're having a vision, so that's why they're able to sort of see the other past lives all in a row to highlight to Aang how the cycle, how the connection actually works. Aang is not talking to any of the previous avatars because it's literally just a kind of projection, kind of image of them, versus, you know, the Roku Aang is talking to here is actually like a past life. But anyway, we move on. Suki alone is the most recently released scene that features a sort of past life. And interestingly, of course, here, it is a past life not talking to the current avatar, but instead to Suki, one of Aang's friends. So, interesting. At her lowest moment, just before the boiling rock, Suki is visited by the spirit of Avatar Kyoshi to tell her that she is not alone and that her friends have not abandoned her. So this is set just before the boiling rock. It seems to be a similar situation to the Zhang scene that we discussed earlier on, just much longer distance, where like it's a situation where someone who is not the current avatar is being visited by the spirit of a past avatar, and I'm guessing Aang is not really aware that this is happening. It's hard to explain how exactly this one works, because Aang is not really near Suki. At this point in the story, yes, they're in the same nation at least, but like Aang doesn't know where Suki is, and they're at the very least multiple fire islands separated from each other. But it has to be related back to Aang somehow, the Kyoshi spirit here, because of the dialogue that Kyoshi says to Suki. In that the dialogue, basically the way it goes is that, like he says, you're not alone. Your friends have not abandoned you. Suki asks, like, how do you know that? And Kyoshi just smiles, and that's the end of their back and forth. Highlighting that Kyoshi knows because she knows, and how she knows is because she is Aang. She is one of Aang's past lives. And she knows because, past avatars have context of the present, and knows that, I guess, Aang, Sokka, and everyone talks about Suki. They haven't forgotten her, haven't abandoned her, and that's how Kyoshi knows. Otherwise, like, if this is really meant to be a scene to really represent, like, that the spirit of Kyoshi is separate, it's this kind of weird dynamic of, like, how does Kyoshi have a connection with Suki that is not facilitated through Aang in any way? And again, visually, they have it right. It's blue, transparent Kyoshi. Obviously, the comics seem to show it this way, with just a light glow on the outside, but otherwise coloured. I think that's a nice way to represent the character while still getting across that it's a spirit. But still, really cool. We move into Korra. So, K-109 out of the past. Throughout Book 1, Korra experiences fractured visions. Eventually, when she's captured, she meditates and finally experiences the full vision, realizing that this was Aang trying to reach out and warn her about the danger of Yakone and his family. So, the main takeaway from this is that Korra struggles spiritually, so Aang has a tough time trying to get through to her. As she learns to become more spiritual, she gets Aang's message. This seems to be a pretty common thing. The first instance of a past life trying to communicate with the present avatar is often difficult, in that Aang needed Fang to come and find him to start a conversation. Aang has to try and basically force a vision through to Korra during moments of weakness, that when she gets like knocked out or she faints or something like that, she experiences these fractured visions, and then finally when she opens up spiritually, she sees the full vision. So that's just a cool idea of the mechanics of this connection. You have to want it, you have to be spiritual to a degree, as we'll get into. So K-112 Endgame. Korra has lost 3 out of 4 elements and is at her lowest point. When Aang appears to her and uses energy bending to unblock her other elements, he also teaches her the technique to undo Amon's blocking elements, or bending technique. So, again, to be consistent, in my mind, Aang should be transparent blue here, or have that kind of spirit glow around him to highlight that he is a spirit. It's still in the physical world. They're in no way in the spirit world here, so that's the way it should be for Aang here. This is a little bit different because I suppose Aang does actually energy bend Korra, and it's this weird situation where like it's a communication with a past life where it's, I suppose, partially the kind of spirit possession thing, but like it's the Avatar doing an ability on themselves. That makes it a little bit confusing, but again, visually I would have liked and preferred it if there was the blue glow around Aang. I get it, they wanted in this specific scene for it to be a little bit of a surprise, and for you to believe that it was Tenzin initially, to get the surprise that it's Aang, but consistency wise it should be a glowing spirit. I know it ruins the surprise to see this glowing airbender character behind him, and it's pretty obvious at that point who it is, but consistency. K207 Beginnings Part 1. Korra is attacked and injured by a dark spirit. The Bonte tribe find her and attempt to heal her spirit. Not remembering who she is, she sees herself as the Avatar. She sees Aang, Roku, Kyoshi, and Karuk. They tell her to find Rava to restore her connection. She meets Wan, the first Avatar, who tells her his story. This is the first time we see the purple kind of version of a spirit form. This seems to be presented as Korra without her memories, because she then sees, first of all, a blue version of herself, which is Korra the Avatar, who remembers she's the Avatar. So that's kind of interesting. Now, where is this? This to me is either some sort of Avatar mind space where she can talk with the past lives not being in the spirit world, or just an unusual representation of the spirit world to some degree. It seems somewhat similar to the kind of cosmic energy area that we've seen before, of like Aang trying to unlock the Avatar state, and cosmic Korra kind of that we'll see later on. But you know, it gets a little bit sort of tricky. Again, the idea is that Wan literally shows Korra his story. So Korra witnesses Wan's backstory in a similar way, I suppose, to the way Roku shows Aang his backstory. So that would imply it is the spirit world, but it's Wan creating the vision, which is why Korra appears as a spirit, you know, transparent spirit in the spirit world. Again, we're trying to create things and make it as consistent as possible, but you can see it's, you know, they're not really helping us with all these kind of odd examples. 213 Darkness Falls. In the Fog of Lost Souls, Tenzin is struggling with the pressures he places on himself when he encounters Aang. Aang tells him that he is not Aang, he is Tenzin. This helps Tenzin to break free of the fog. So first of all, I'd say that this is not overly clear as to whether or not this for sure is a past life encounter moment, or if this is just some sort of like Tenzin in the fog sort of projecting a like version of Aang he sort of imagines. For the character, I think it means a lot more for this to actually be the spirit of Aang, and so the truth be told to Tenzin in this instance, rather than Tenzin just sort of imagine Aang from his own perspective, like saying that to himself. So timing wise it works, because this scene does take place like literally just before Rava is destroyed. Everything is super enhanced spiritually due to harmonic convergence, so it's not out of the blue that this is like an impossible scene to happen. Again, this is probably a scene that's again similar to the Suki alone instance of, you know, Korra's off in a different scene fighting Unalaq at this point, but a past life encounter happens without her being aware. So it's similar to the Suki, similar to the Zhang scene, I guess. Next, K213 Darkness Falls. Note the way they show the past lives being destroyed. It is all of them one by one fading away into nothing with each hit from Unalaq. It is meant to show the data of the past lives being lost. If the past lives still exist as spirits beyond this, then what exactly is fading away in this scene? What did Korra actually lose? And I think this is always a tricky question for people who are really trying to defend the idea that there's a simple way for the past lives to be restored, is that the intent of this scene very clearly is that the past lives are gone, and they commit to it so strongly in the future seasons that there's no way to get them back. You have to really fully believe that the show has
done what it says it has done, and that there's not a simple, oh, but this is actually the way it is. No, what allows the past lives to happen is lost with the destruction of Rava. It's gone. That's what is disappearing in this scene, and that's what you have to sort of fully explain around to try and come up with a solution for getting the past lives back. So their spirits still existing despite their spirits fading away into nothing doesn't, to me, make a lot of sense. Next, 214 Light in the Dark. Here's where Korra merges with Rava again. The cycle has started again, but the past lives before Korra are gone. So that's just pretty straightforward. In Korra Book 4 Balance, it covers a few episodes, that's why I'm not so specific here. Even Korra Book 4 clarifies more on how all this works. In K406 Battle of Zaofu, Korra can use the Avatar state, but is not fully recovered or reconnected with Rava. It takes up until K409, Beyond the Wilds, for Korra to spiritually reconnect with Rava. This highlights the idea that spirituality is needed to both communicate with the past lives and also directly with Rava. So that's just another Korra example of that. Next we move into the Kyoshi novels. So obviously not a lot of visuals to go off here. Like we've seen before, the first connection can be tricky. With Kyoshi, who grows to dislike Kuruk based on what she's heard about him, it is even more difficult since she actively doesn't want to communicate with him. This means Kuruk has to force the communication, which causes Kyoshi pain. As Kyoshi flies on a bison over an island that Kuruk destroyed in the past, Kuruk's connection to that location means that the attempt at communicating is even stronger. It causes Kyoshi to fall off the bison and into the water below. In the water, she hears a fractured message from Kuruk, as well as seeing him in the water. We find out that you cannot communicate with a past life unless you are capable of communicating with every past life before them. Kyoshi wants to talk to Yang Chen, but cannot unless she first allows a connection to Kuruk. So that is consistent. We see with both Korra and Aang that they also had a tricky sort of first communication. Not quite as tricky as Kyoshi's one here, where she actively hates Kuruk based on what she knows about him. So it's truly painful the way the connection is nearly forced in this instance, where Kyoshi nearly dies in this instance. So that's kind of interesting. But we move on. Nyahatha, a Fire Sage and Bonte tribe member, explains to Kyoshi that there are 3 methods of communication with the past lives. 1, a one-way vision sent by the past life. It requires interpretation and there is no back and forth. It's just a vision. 2, if you let a past life take over your body and speak to someone else, that person can relay back to you what was said by the possession once it's over. 3, meditate into the spirit world and communicate directly. I appreciated the book attempting to bring everything together, but obviously, as we've already gone through, yes, this covers the basics, but there are a bunch of other like specific instances of like, what about the instances of past lives, their spirit just appearing before you in the physical world, where you're not in the spirit world yourself? How does it work, when, the possession thing, the way it's explained, it doesn't necessarily feel exactly like it's the same thing that we see in the Roku and Kyoshi scene, but I guess that's what it has to be referencing. The one-way vision, but then we've also seen that you can have the vision that like Roku shows Aang, which is kind of not quite the same thing. So, really strong attempt to bring everything together. It just highlights that they've been kind of inconsistent across the franchise with this. A lot of the stuff mostly works, but as we can see, like, it's not everything. Next, to get the rest of Kuruk's past, she goes back to the destroyed island where she partially connected with Kuruk in the water and stays in the water this time. Here, she does manage to meet Kuruk in the spirit world. They talk, and he then shows her the rest of his memories. At the end of the book, a fox spirit guides Kyoshi to the spirit of Avatar Yang Chen, where they have a conversation. Finally, connecting with Kuruk has allowed her to speak to the next avatar in the chain. So that's pretty much everything we have about avatars communicating with their past lives. Where does that leave us with? Do we have an answer? Past lives separate or always linked with Rava? On the separate side of things, which is the one that I personally don't necessarily think is the case, we have stuff like the Tenzin and the Suki moments, as well as I suppose potentially the Zhangzhang moment, highlighting the idea of like the past lives having the ability to communicate with people that in instances that the current avatar is unaware of, which is kind of interesting. The Karuk escape from the spirit world episode also sort of implying that he's still sort of doing his own thing even when Aang is not around, even though they never confirmed that that's actually the case. Then for the only facilitated through Rava, as in like past lives are gone because Rava was destroyed, you're not getting them back. One spirit obviously is a really obvious example. Doesn't make sense for there to be multiple instances of Wan's spirit, considering the avatar is a reincarnation cycle of Wan. Two, the intent of the plot point of losing the past lives, the way it is shown and talked about, makes it pretty clear that the thing the avatar talks to is simply gone as of the destruction of Rava. The spirit world is not an afterlife. Why would the past lives just exist there, but no one else, in that, we don't see any other dead people, and if that was where dead people went, you would have seen other people, but we don't. The other point, obviously, that I mentioned earlier on was that we only ever see one past life at a time, suggesting that Rava can only sort of facilitate communication with one at a time. And also they've established sort of rules about the idea of, to talk to each avatar you have to go through it in a chain. And if they were separate, I don't think there would be a rule about like, oh, you can only talk to Kyoshi if you've already talked to Roku. If they're fully separate beings, why is that rule in place? There's enough technicalities that I think there's much more that are sort of locking it in this way than are opening the door to them being separate. And you can roughly explain away the instances, I think, in the separate category, to the point where, at least I feel pretty confident that, like, okay, this is the way it is, but, it is just sort of speculation based on what we know right now, and they could choose to go pretty much either way they want with it. So, where does that leave us on sort of what are the past lives that we actually see? Because that's probably the key thing to get from this. For me, the idea is that because Rava is with every avatar from birth to death, she stores the essence of who they are, their knowledge and an aspect of their power to add to the avatar state. She is then able to use this data of the past avatar to create the spiritual projection that the current avatar talks to. The idea being that Rava stores all memories of each avatar, and because she is still part of the current avatar, the spirit that used to belong to the past avatar is still present. She can use the data and the spirit of the current avatar to effectively bring a past life back to life and communicate with the current avatar. Because the past life and current avatar are effectively still the same person, the past lives do have context of the present day, but still will tackle problems from the perspective of their own era primarily. The idea that if you make a copy of your memories and give that copy life, it is basically you. And in the case of the avatar, their own spirit is still present, which helps. This is that sort of, if you could digitize your kind of like brain, your memories, and put yourself in sort of like an android, that android would effectively have everything that you are. It is you. But from then on out, the two copies go their separate ways. But in this case, obviously, actual sort of physical Roku is dead, but here is Roku sort of alive again through this past life dynamic and concept, and that is why he is himself, everything about him. It is why when you bring Karuk back, he of course is going to reflect on his past, what he was doing right as he died, hunting Ko, about what happened to Umi, and so on. And then final slide here is, can the past lives be restored? I'm sure if the creators wanted to, they could introduce a method to make it happen and have it work. But with our understanding of things right now, I personally don't quite see a way to perfectly restore the past lives. In my opinion, a workaround would be for Rava to use the Tree of Time to get her own memories back, if they are even impacted by her own destruction. It seems like the energy she stores is different than her own memories as a being. This way, Korra can talk to Rava and get either Rava's own opinion or Rava's take on what a certain avatar would think on a topic. The other thing to keep in mind is that the past lives being gone only impacts Korra and avatars after her. And even then, the concept is still in play in that Korra will still be able to help the next avatar, etc. Despite obviously what an Avatar's Chronicle says, I'm treating that as being a error in that book, which is obviously a not particularly high in the canon hierarchy style book. So I fully believe the Avatar after Korra will be able to communicate with Korra. Just Korra, but will be able to communicate with her. And then any story featuring an Avatar from the one after one all the way up to Korra can still feature the past lives. So we only lose a few potential character interactions from the entire franchise. And I think that's the key thing of like, what have we actually lost? It's obviously the Korra continuation stuff. We're not going to see Korra communicating with the past lives. That's obviously like disappointing. And then future avatars, who knows how long it's going to take to get to the avatar after Korra, we won't get to see any beyond them talking to Korra, and that's fine. But what it means is that any continuation with Aang can talk to any past life. With Kyoshi, she can talk to any past life. If we go to Zito, he can talk to past lives. You know, it's still all there. This concept still exists in this overall universe, which isn't just going forward, but it's also filling in gaps that go back to the past lives still being around. And I think that's the key point to realize in all of this, that look at the information that we went through. We have past lives in Aang, in the comics as well, even recent comics like Suki Alone. We had it in Korra up to a certain point. And we can always go back and tell stories set earlier on in Korra's journey that feature the past lives, like in between book 1 and 2 is an opportunity to do that. And then the Kyoshi novels are obviously set in the past, yet they only came out like a year or two ago. And they have the ability to cover past life stuff, which was a heavy part of the plot with Karuk, highlighting that this stuff can still happen in the modern day. So, you know, I think people do tend to sort of overreact a little bit to this. And like, I get it, it's an emotional topic. But to me, I really appreciate what they did in Korra Book 2 with making this dire consequence. It sticks around. That it's impressive that Korra was able to get the Avatar restored as much as she did. But the loss of the past lives is the thing that we don't get back. And I think if they gave that back too easily, it would take something away from the power of what Book 2 was able to do at the end. So there are my thoughts on the past lives topic. So that's pretty much been most of the topic. Obviously, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on all of these scenes. Where do you stand on a lot of these topics with regards to sort of the consistency or potential inconsistencies between a lot of these past life communication scenes? Where do you stand on the topic of can the past lives be restored, and a lot of the surrounding questions to that. But other than that, I'll just end by thanking my YouTube channel members. So big thank you to the YouTube channel members at the Avatar tier: Cash D's, Martine Monterosa, Caitlin Thurston, Brittany M, and Tristan Morgan. Thanks for supporting the channel. And yeah, other than that, that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.